Thank you so much, Asha. Thank you all for joining me today. If you have seen my bio, there's two things. One is you'll note that I've lightened my hair and I really love it. And so when my grays grow in, it's not as visible. So thing number one, it's still me. And two, you can see that from my background, obviously I'm very proud of the master's degree that I got from what was Cal State Hayward. Talk about being old. This is back in the day. And I wanted you to know also, I don't come from a family of privilege. And so my mother and my father immigrated from South Korea. My father was an accountant and my mother was a nurse. My father worked during the day, my mother worked during the night. So one of them could be home to take care of us and send us to school and that sort of thing. I grew up in, I spent probably 3 or 4 years, we lived in literally a one-bedroom apartment in Jackson Heights, Queens, where my parents actually had a bed in the pantry and the 3 kids had the bedroom. So, I know the Protestant work ethic. I didn't go to Harvard. My parents were very, very supportive of education. They scraped and saved so that their 3 kids could get college degrees, and we self-funded our graduate degrees, but my parents were very, very big believers in education. So through the 30 plus years that I've been working, because when Asha said 30-year veteran, I thought, oh, maybe people will think I'm 30 years old, but no, really. In the 30 years that I've been working, I have worked very hard, but I've learned a lot of lessons. A lot of lessons that I want to share with you, just sort of summarized in some of the key ones that I think will help you. I also moved 6 times while I was working for Kraft and Best Foods. And my husband, who died in 2018, at the time when we were moving, literally could not hold down a job because we were going to move, every 11 months to maybe 20 months. And so that was kind of an interesting dynamic, a personal dynamic back in the day when I was growing up in business. We literally had to move to different locations and divisions. I have been to not 1, but 2 360-degree feedback leadership retreats where I learned. The first one, I will tell you, I cried a lot because I thought people just hated me. And we're going to talk about coming out of comfort zone, coming out of being afraid of feedback, whether it's, and feedback is also known as criticism, right? Whether it's constructive or destructive criticism, there's something to learn always from that. Then after my 2 times at 360-degree leadership retreats, then I guess I got good enough at it where Best Foods actually asked me to lead a session on self-awareness for a program that was for mid-level and slightly higher level managers. So learned a lot about how to interact with folks. And so what I want to share with you today really is I want to talk with you on self-advocacy, because I think even though you may think this is a no-brainer concept, I will tell you that a lot of women particularly do not self-advocate. And I want to share with you some of the myths that I think, when you read them, you might say, well, gee, I knew that. You might know that, you might not know it. You may not realize what's happening. So with that, I'd like to share some slides that I created. And by the way, men who are on this, just so you know, I have a son and a daughter. So I root for both genders. So Chitra, if you want to, can we see the deck on the screen? All right. Can we get the whole page? Hang on. Chitra, you're on mute again. I saw this very funny meme about coronavirus. So many of them are out there where they say Zoom meetings now are like seances, right? So we're saying, Chitra, can you hear us? We can't see you. Turn on your mic.
Yeah, it's odd that it's sort of sending itself on mute now and then. Can everyone see the screen?
I could, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, we could.
Okay.
If you're,
So this is my intro page. It
Shall
is
I move?
entitled
Shall I?
Self Advocate. Hello.
Sorry, did you want me to move off this? You let me know. Yes.
Yeah. I'll let you know. It's titled Self Advocacy and the Glass Ceiling, and I call it a fractured fairy tale. And as we go through this, you'll sort of see why I've chosen this particular format to introduce these topics. So, next page, please. From experience, um, I want to share just two things with you. One is the concept of self-advocacy. And what you see here is the definition, which is the action of representing your views or interests. And so three sort of big concepts that we're going to talk about is one, you have direct control over all your actions and reactions. You do. And some of this might seem intuitive, but we're going to talk about why it's not always intuitive. Actions represent things that you do or do not do. So inaction also impacts your self-advocacy, including what you say or don't say. And you might meet or you might have expectations that your manager will be your advocate or someone else will be your advocate. I will tell you, you are your own best advocate. The concept of glass ceiling that you find, and it could be, and again, it could be men or women, but the glass ceiling, this exists obviously over a long period of time because actions that were taken or not taken by you and by others in the environment. By changing your actions, you can change the way your environment reacts to you because your environment is made up of people whom you work with. People will respond to what you say, how you say it. They'll respond to the way you create working relationships. You can change the way people respond to you. You may not change them because that's almost impossible. It's hard to change people, and that is not what you're here to do at work. But you can change their response to you. And so behavior, when you create an action, someone will respond or react to it. And this is how you can start to change your environment. And this leads me to what I just want to make sure that you all appreciate conditioning the environment. What that means is you need to prime and change the environment to be more favorable to you. So what you're doing is conditioning the environment so that you can have more success and that you can have greater self-advocacy. Next page, please, Chitra. Sorry. All right. So, misconceptions and the truth. In fairy tales, a beautiful, kind, and happy princess will be rescued by a prince. No. The concept here in business is women think that other women in higher up positions in the organizations should advocate for me. Don't forget, there's always an evil queen in the story. If you're lucky, you may have a woman higher up in the organization that advocates for you. If you're lucky, maybe you work in an environment where you have that one person who does, but luck and hope are not strategies. And we'll talk more about this. I've led these sessions in other types of meetings, and literally women who are law partners in law firms will tell me there is only one woman sitting what we call, around the table. And this senior partner would not bring this slightly junior level lawyer into or to the quote table. So did not advocate for her, did not try to put her into highly visible, strong opportunities. So we'll talk about that, but this happens all the time in real life. And just so you know, many older women whom particularly as I was coming up in business, many older women believe they've really clawed their way to the top. They've worked so hard to get to where they are. And they see up and coming younger folks as a threat. So that can happen too. You would think that there would be more conducive, the environment would be more conducive to mentoring and coaching from people who are more experienced, but it doesn't always work like that. And another reality is, regardless of gender, whether it's men or women, people generally don't look to push another person's success. They are far more focused on themselves. How can I succeed? How can I get ahead? How can I get a promotion? They're not really thinking about how can I make you succeed? How can I help you develop your skill set? How can I help you create a path of success in this organization? So in the what to do section, this is obviously not an exhaustive list, but I've tried to pick out some of the ones that are the most important that I think really focus in on, again, self-awareness, coming out of your comfort zone, develop working relationships with higher level managers, irrespective of gender and function. Now, there are ways to do that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the deck as well. Find people who can coach or mentor you, and it doesn't have to be your manager. It can be anybody. It can be a person who's been in there maybe in a job similar to yours, but they've been in it for 20 years. It could be a manager in another function who just has a good way of talking to people and coaching people, or you might be in a meeting and they might mention to you after the meeting, hey, the way you were moderating that meeting, you'd be a lot more effective if you really included everyone around the table to participate. That's somebody who's reaching out to you and saying, I can coach you. That's not a criticism. That's a person saying, I can coach you. And I'd be happy to do that. So you're looking for these kinds of folks. You actively need to involve yourself across the organization to meet others. And how do you do that? And I've just given a couple of examples. Cross-functional project teams, raise your hand when an opportunity comes up. Even if it looks difficult, raise your hand and try to get on that team. You'll get to know people across different functions. You'll see managers from other areas. You'll be able to interact with them in a productive way. You can also, in your organization, you can, obviously this happens after coronavirus, but participate in charitable functions. At Best Foods, we always participated in a run walk for diabetes. I always volunteered to be one of the organizers of that. And I got to meet several divisional CEO type folks as a result of that. And it's a great way to talk to folks and meet people without the big desk that's in between you. Develop knowledge in other areas. I put this here because it is so important. The more you know about your business, the more you know about what your company does and how it all interacts, the better you will be, one, as a business person, and two, you'll actually go out and you'll meet other folks across functions. So how do you do this? Ask to be included in, and I've named a few areas: production meetings, IT meetings, financial planning meetings, as a silent observer. If you don't ask, you'll never know that you can do this. And we've had folks because I focus on coaching and mentoring in my organization, but I've asked people to be in meetings and they don't say anything during the meeting. They may go to 12 meetings in a period of 3 months. They say nothing, but they're absorbing it all. They're learning more about what others do in the organization. It's a great way for them to meet people and to talk to folks about what they do. Chitra, next page, please. Another misconception and the truth. My fairy godmother will see my goodness and take care of me. No. The way this applies in business is, the concept is, if I do a good job and work harder than everyone else, leaders in my organization will advocate for me. They'll look for opportunities for me. I will tell you that diligent, hardworking employees are not readily recognized. And I have been in positions where I have seen incompetent or mediocre people who are just in the right place at the right time. They've developed a good relationship with the hiring manager. And the person who is really competent for that job gets looked over, even though that individual may have worked harder, may be smarter, and may just have more expertise. But they did not condition their environment as well. They did not take the time to get out of their comfort zone and meet people, talk to them, get relationships going in their organization. And I'll tell you, quiet productivity can always be taken for granted. You may work for a manager who takes the credit for your work, because that's happened to me, and I'll tell you it happens to other people. Managers, because it makes them look good. You do a good job and your manager takes credit for it, it makes them look great, right? Because it's a good piece of work. Or you may be considered an essential brick in the foundation where you are, because you're doing such a good job, people can't possibly fathom what they would do without you in that job. And just because you do a great job doesn't mean you'll automatically be considered for a promotion. No one's going to tap you on the shoulder necessarily and say, hey, would you like to be considered for this job? So again, and in the work environment, I say all these things and you're probably thinking, that's not fair. I'll tell you, there is no fair in the work environment. There's no such thing as fair. It doesn't exist. There's only action, reaction, and changing the environment to advocate for you. You have to take this on as your personal objective. So what do you do? How do you get in? What do you do? First, get information. Talk to managers in higher positions and ask for their story in an informal way. You know, you might see them in a cafeteria. You might see them after a meeting. You might be walking down the hall and you might just introduce yourself. And if you just introduced yourself, I wouldn't say right away, ask that person like, how did you get successful? But I would say introduce yourself, get to know them, and develop I would say an informal relationship where you get a chance at some point to say, tell me about your story. How did you get here? Find out how the company posts open positions. You would be surprised. There are a lot of people who don't understand how a company posts open positions. And so they don't even know a job opening has occurred, and then suddenly it's filled. So this is information that you need. Talk to formal and informal leaders to understand, what do you look for in a candidate? How do you define success? When somebody's doing a good job, what does that look like to you? Why this is important is you need to get a perspective of how others will measure success, how others will measure your productivity. And informal leaders are just as important as formal leaders, by the way, because they become informal leaders through interacting with others. They become informal leaders through positioning themselves as someone who is a go-to person. So formal and informal leaders, also very important. And then develop a plan to improve your skill set, either upwards or cross-functionally. And it can be somebody outside your company, your particular function, or your industry. Why this is important is when you identify what you think a person needs to be successful. So let's just say, to move up to a next level, you're in an operational job, but you need to understand more about how the company financials work. If you don't learn how the company financials work, you will be passed over for that job. And so you can look to somebody in finance, whether it's a controller, whether it's a VP of finance, and you can say, look, I really want to improve this skill set. Can you help me? What are the fundamentals? How do I do this? It's not comfortable. Everything I'm going to tell you today is outside of your comfort zone, because it means coming out of who you are, reaching out to other people. It means deliberately calling people just to chat so you can develop a relationship with them. It means even if you know that someone's a CEO and you come out of a meeting and you think, oh, I can't talk to her, she's the CEO, what am I going to say? That happens, but you can't do that. You've got to just say, hi, that was a great meeting, or, thanks so much for the last post on Jostle, something like that. And people come up to me and they do that. And I remember who they are. They write me a short email. They say, really appreciate the last article, blah, blah, blah. And they're not afraid to do that. And you can't be afraid. You have to put yourself out there. Next page, please. All right. Okay. This one, I say requirements to go to the ball: a beautiful gown, glass slippers, tiara, and a coach pulled by 6 horses. And I say, maybe you do need to have that. The misconception is, I have to be more like a man or this manager or someone else to be successful in the work environment. Like I have to get the same shoes that she's wearing, or I have to do, I have to, whatever it is. I have to wear makeup. No, I have to do this. That's a misconception. So no, you can be who you are, but you must develop an understanding of how interpersonal dynamics works in your organization. No, you can keep your individuality, but you must behave in a way that gets results. So you don't have to change who you are, but you may have to change your behavior. And you're going to have to monitor how other people react to you in order for you to find like the behavior that works best for you. And no, but you have to learn how to fake it until you make it. And we'll talk more about that. So what does that mean? What do I have to do differently? What are the requirements? Well, one, you got to network actively. I will tell you, the dozens of women I've coached over my career, women typically don't do this well, because when I say, why don't you network more with your fellow managers across the country? They say, well, how do I do that? I said, pick up the phone, call them, and just say, hey, happy Friday. And I said, chit chat with them for a few minutes. You don't have to present a business issue. You don't have to take up a lot of their time, but developing a relationship and developing actively networking requires you to reach out and talk to people. You don't have to spend a lot of their time, but until you start actively calling them and networking with them, you're not going to develop a relationship with them. So example, one of the women that I have mentored in my organization, we promoted her to a senior division manager. Great skill set. In person, really worked well with her group in Oregon. There were 4 other managers at her same level. 3 of them were men. I told her, I said, you have to put this on your quarterly objectives. You have to call them. You have to call each one of them every week and just chat with them for a few minutes. And after some time, she realized she was able to talk to them about maybe a certain business issue, a challenge she was having, and she started to develop much better relationships with them. And now she networks with them all the time. They talk probably, 3 times a day. Seek feedback actively. Now, this, I will tell you, is so important because you cannot know what other people are thinking about you unless they tell you. Most people are uncomfortable approaching someone and saying, hey, that was a great meeting, but you could be even more effective if you would include everyone in the room. Not everyone wants to go out and put themselves on a limb and say that, because I might just give them the finger, I mean, not everybody responds to feedback well. So you have to solicit feedback. You need to find someone you can trust in a meeting or in whatever you're doing and say, hey, can I just talk to you for a few minutes? So I thought that meeting went well, but I'm sure there are things I could have done better. Did you notice anything in particular that you think I could do differently? And by the way, you can do this with more than one person. And the great thing is that you will start to actually become viewed as somebody who seeks feedback and is trying to get better at what you're doing. But it's not a place for frail egos. You can't, if somebody says, well, you really kind of just stunk at this, you can't like break into tears or tell that person, well, you stink at this too. It's not a place for frail egos. You have to be able to take feedback. And like I said, the other word for feedback is criticism. It can be constructive and it could be destructive, the way they say it. It doesn't matter. It's still, the noun here is that it's criticism, it's feedback. That's the noun. And so that's the most important part of your takeaway. Lack of confidence, it happens. You're early on in your career, you're like, I can't do that. Like, I can't ask somebody what they think of me. I'm barely hanging on. I will tell you, you're not the only one. A lot of folks earlier in their career or just in lower level positions, they lack the confidence to say anything. And so what you've got to do is you've just got to make sure that if you have lack of confidence, do not let that get in the way of seeking feedback or, like I said, criticism. It's not a nasty word. Criticism is the same thing as feedback. We just like to make it look prettier by saying feedback instead of criticism. Develop a plan to address areas in which you need to get better and own that you need to improve. Everybody needs to improve. I will tell you, I still need to improve. There are things I do I know I can improve upon. There were earlier times in my career where I needed a lot more improvement. And so, for me, finding people that I could develop a good working relationship with, who I could go to and say, look, I'm really trying to change these 3 things about me. So would you do me a favor? And when you're in meetings with me, or if you see me, if you observe me doing this behavior, can you do me a favor and just like come talk to me afterwards? Because I'm trying to change that aspect of what I do and how I interact with people. So everybody can improve. If you ever get to the point in your career where you think you don't need to improve, you should probably get someone to give you some criticism, because no one is ever at that level. And CEOs who think they're at their level, I will tell you, are just arrogant. They're arrogant because every CEO, every leader in business can get better. And when you seek out this criticism, don't be afraid. It's work. It's not who you are on the inside. You're not asking someone to say, hey, am I a valuable person on the inside? That's not what you're asking. You're asking like, hey, when I talk to you this way, when I talk in meetings this way, when I don't talk at all, because a lot of women do this too. They don't say anything in meetings. They just sit back and they're like super quiet. That's not helpful. That's self-advocating. They're afraid to ask a question for clarification because they think, oh, I might look stupid. So what? I bet there's more people in that room who would love to ask that question. So, it's work. It's not who you are on the inside. It's not the value of who you are, your heart and your soul. It is work. It's a skill set. Interacting with people is a skill set. And in order for you to get better at it, you're going to have to go outside your comfort zone. You're going to have to ask for criticism. You're going to have to say, I need to do these things better. And write it down. Have an improvement plan. And ask people in your environment whom you can trust to give you that feedback so that you can constantly change your behavior. When you change your behavior, you change your actions to be more positive, to create more positive reactions from others. You are conditioning your environment. That's what you're doing. Next page, please. Here's the fairy tale. Fate is fate. The stepsisters can't possibly live happily ever after. And I hear this a lot from especially younger folks or lower level folks in the organization as well, lower level managers or hourly. I can't control what happens because I'm just doing my job. I can't control what happens because I don't make the policies. I can't control what happens because, I don't know, I got really mad and I started yelling at that person and it was really hard to not yell. And any number of reasons you can put in here, say, I can't control what happens because blah. I will tell you, nobody can control every outcome. But you can control, the one thing you can do is you can control the way you act and react to people. The way you act and react to issues, the way you act and react to challenges. You have much greater control once you start to condition your environment. Why? Because you start to have people who align themselves to you. You respond in a way that draws people in, that gives them the sense of, oh, I could really work with Penny. When I have a problem and I go to Penny and I go, Penny, blah, 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 blah. She says, okay, well, let's talk about it. What's our objective? Or is it how you feel? Or what's not effective? Penny's so open about things like that. It's like, well, I can go to her with any problems because she responds favorably. You've just conditioned, Penny has just conditioned the people she works with, right? Because I tell you, she may hate their guts, and that is okay. You could hate the guts of someone you work with. You just can't say it. You can't show it. You still have to work well with them. But you can go home and say, God, I hate Penny's guts. Oh, I can't stand her. But at work, you're like, hey, Penny, and positive conditioning, actions, reactions, what you say is all people know about you. They cannot read your mind. What you say and how you say it is all they know of who you are. So if you can change that, you can change the way people respond to you. Your specific behaviors solicit the response of people around you. You know this. I mean, you might say, oh, Lisa, that's so intuitive. Like, who doesn't know that? Well, you think back on some of the ways you've acted and you realize, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Or I wish I could take those words back. Or I wish I would have sat there and just bit my tongue and worked through this problem with Jack. Instead, I got up and told him he was stupid and left the room. Okay. You can control your behavior. You can control how you respond. I'll tell you, my son, when he was little, had a fairly well, I would say well developed. By that, I mean a pretty difficult time. He has sensory integration dysfunction. We caught it early enough where we had an occupational therapist work with him in the classroom and at home and in therapy office. One of the things she taught him, which was great, was he would get so frustrated because he wouldn't understand something and he would just have an outbreak. So the therapist taught him to count back from 10 to 1. I know this sounds so simple, but when he was starting to lose it, he would learn, he would go 10, 9, 8, all the way down to 1. By the time he got to 1, it had been just enough time to calm himself. I'll tell you, you work for a little kid, but it works in business. It's not, you know, people, anytime you have 2 people in a room, you're going to get conflict. There's a possibility that person's going to upset you. There's a possibility that person's, you know, is going to create an environment where you regret what you say. I will tell you that 10 to 1 works really well, even in business, even as a grown adult. I want to talk a little bit more about nothing wrong with fake it until you make it. You are never going to genuinely like all your colleagues. If you think you're going to get into a company and get on a team where you just really like everyone you work with, I will tell you that that is a fairy tale, and that does not exist in real life. It just doesn't exist. You're not going to like all the people you work with. You might like a couple of them, you might like one of them, you might like none of them. It happens. It's work. It's a work environment. Not everyone who seems friendly will have good intentions, and there are plenty of backstabbers in businesses. Plenty of backstabbers. Your manager could be a backstabber because your manager takes credit for all your work and doesn't even put you into the light. So that's an example, right, of challenges you're going to run into. Also realize, though, that people who you may not realize can help you actually may and will help you. You've got to be very open-minded. You've got to develop that kind of look. I would say a corporate, a friendly work face, because these people exist in the organization. You just may not know who they are. The fake it until you make it strategy can buy you time. It will let you assess. It will let you think about something, let something sink in before you come to a conclusion or an action. And sometimes this is the only tool you need. A lot of folks, particularly, I would say more women than men, at least from my experience, feel like they have to react to something right away. So if someone says, here's a challenge, Lisa, we've got, we're going to have to sign this vendor contract, because if we don't sign it like right away, then, we're going to lose the opportunity to sign this vendor contract. Like, okay, well, I think we need more information about that vendor contract. I think we need more information about what the impact will be. What do we lose? What do we gain? You don't have to make a decision right away. You don't have to fill what I would call, I will tell you, a silence void. The fake it until you make a strategy just buys you time. This is exactly the example I gave about how Penny can't stand her colleagues, but she smiles. She fakes it. When they do a good job, she recognizes it and she says, Jack, you really did a great job. I'm an observer on this project and just want you to know I think you did a really great job handling it. At home, she can't stand Jack, and she's like, she has like one of those voodoo dolls and is like punching Jack with a pencil. And she can do that at home because you know what? The thing about Jack is that he's her colleague. She doesn't have to invite him over for dinner. She doesn't have to have drinks with him. She doesn't have to interact with him socially. So the fake it until you make a strategy, believe it or not, folks, works extremely well in the work environment because you're there for a limited amount of time with your colleagues. You need to make sure that you have your clarity of thought, a response, not a reaction, but a response that's appropriate, that's going to help you self-advocate, that's going to help you condition your environment so that people respond to you in a way that will help you be more successful. So that's pretty much what I had in terms of prepared materials. I'm happy to talk to you, to answer questions. And by the way, if you're going to ask me a question, please don't call me Ms. M, just call me Lisa.